I'll take this moment before we really get started to let everyone know that we are recording this event for um, asynchronous viewing for those who can't attend in this moment. We will at the end have a question and answer session, and we will cut that part off from the part that we post. So if you feel like you're not sure about being on camera for that part will not be posted on our website. So it will only be the kind of the presentational portion of it. During the presentational portion, if you have questions, you're welcome to ask them. You can throw them in the chat. If you don't feel comfortable making those questions known yourself, you can send me a private message with your questions, and I'm happy to ask them for you if you don't want to be associated with your questions. So it is 10:01. It's so lovely to see all you people here who are interested in understanding better principles of accessibility in digital design of our courses. So we're here this morning with Christina van Ittersum, who is a new-ish instructional designer here with K-State, but not totally new to K-State. And so we're happy to have her here. She is has a lot of knowledge about accessibility, and so she's going to present on those principles here. If you have questions, you can ask questions after. You can also reach out to her with specific questions about your course if you want to meet with her in a one-on-one capacity. So with that being said, I will turn the mic over to Christina, and we'll learn about principles of accessibility.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am so glad there's so many of you here today. I'll admit I'm a little nervous about that. It's been a while since I've done a Zoom presentation like this. I feel like we're dusting off the cobwebs heading into January. So yeah, I'm Christina van Ittersum. I am a white feminine presenting person with red wavy shoulder length hair. I'm wearing a K-State sweatshirt today. And we're going to be talking about the principles of digital accessibility. So with that, one of the things that I want to do today, I will be screen sharing off and on. I don't have a slide deck. I will be putting things into the chat. I'll be looking at the chat. So if you're wanting to connect, we can do that there. You can also unmute, and then follow Andy's wonderful descriptions and suggestions for asking questions. And then I would be remiss if I also didn't point out that we have someone who's going to be very new to K-State, Todd Mowbray, who is going to be in the Student Access Center as an accessibility trainer. So he and I are going to be teaming up in the future. So yeah, we're talking about principles of digital accessibility today. I am going to try to not bore you with the why digital accessibility is important. You are here. Clearly, you know that it is important. Perhaps you have heard about the changes coming in 2026. Perhaps you read about the Digital Accessibility Initiative that came out in K-State today. If you haven't seen those yet, I'll go ahead and throw those in the chat for you. Regardless of the law, we know that digital accessibility is the right thing to do. It just is. The principles of digital accessibility play into usability when it comes to making the internet a better place for everyone. So the 4 principles that we're looking at today are, you can remember using the acronym POUR. So everything on the internet needs to be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. We're going to look at those 4 principles and 1 or 2 examples each. Some of those examples will be in Canvas. Some of those will be in the chat, and some will just be some images. But POUR, those principles, are supported by that law. I just wanted to throw that out there for everyone. In the law, they reference WCAG. So WCAG is sort of these 12 ideas of design. They're divided into these 4 categories of how content needs to be organized. So this is exactly what the law is asking for. And WCAG existed long before, existed long before any government rulings by Section 508 or the Department of Justice. That's been around for forever. Tim Berners-Lee, basically, the person who created the internet, was very interested in accessibility from the beginning. So WCAG is not new. It has been around. It's the Wild West out there. And then there was more and more support from the government. So, what's important? Those are the 4 principles, and that's the law. One last clarification. Everything we're talking about here today is accessibility, not accommodations. So I think it's important to think about those 2 things differently. Accommodations are very individualized. They are very specific, and they're often reactive. So a student is showing up to a class and they need these accommodations. Accessibility is the opposite. Accessibility is for everyone, so not one person specific, and it is more proactive. It's things that we should be doing all along. Yeah, so just as our little outline, if you are also a digital note taker, this is going to be the outline that we are working with today for POUR, the perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So first, let's talk about perception and how we perceive content. So when we are creating content for the internet, it needs to be perceivable, not just by us as people, but also for assistive technologies. We're designing for humans and we're designing for technology. The difference is that humans are very smart, and despite the impending AI overlord takeover, technology really isn't that smart. So we have lots of tricks and specific things that we need to consider. The easiest way that we make content more accessible and more perceivable would be if we're adding captions to a video in media site or YouTube, preferably media site, but you can hear more about that at 11 o'clock with Brandon. So we want our content to be perceivable by adding those captions. There are 2 types of captions that you might be familiar with. There are closed captions. So that's something that you can turn on your TV. You can turn off or on a media site video. Those are preferred because they're optional. Sometimes captions could be distracting for certain types of people, so we want to be able to turn them off. Open captions are what you might see in TikTok or Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts. And that is where a content creator has hard-coded something on their video. In general, that's not something that we want to do. I'm sure there's exceptions to the rule out there, but in general, open captions are not something we want to do. So to make it more perceivable, we're going to add those captions. On the other side of things, we're also designing for technology. So this would be alternative text. Alternative text is for images. We can do it in Canvas. You can do it in any Microsoft product, social media, Outlook, all these things. You can add alternative text. I could talk about alternative text till the cows come home and why it's good and how you might have different types of images. But the first image we're going to look at, and I'm going to go ahead and drop this into the chat for you guys, oops, nope, is it going to work today? I don't know why that image doesn't want to copy. That's okay. I will share my screen instead. So an image that we might need to have alternative text for would be something like this. So I had somebody on my team create this for me. This is a great image. It's got good colors. It's pretty readable, hopefully for everyone online if your screens are big enough. But it would need alternative text. I'm going to throw this into the chat for you guys. I would definitely look at folks online. One of my biggest suggestions is, like, if you do not have friends or people in your life who are differently abled, go find some content creators who are. Molly Burke is one of my favorites, and she has a super awesome video of how she uses technology. She uses screen readers on her phones, on computers, all sorts of stuff. It's about 12 minutes long, but it's super helpful. So something like this would need alternative text if it was shared online. I probably wouldn't recommend sharing this online. This might be something you would see on social media, perhaps, but this isn't necessarily the best content for a course or for an email. Instead, because it's all an image, a screen reader can't actually pick up any of the words on there. So the alternative text would need to be why web accessibility is important. And you would need to have all of this. The significance of digital accessibility extends well beyond meeting legal requirements, yada, yada, yada. That is a lot of text and would be a little bit troublesome for somebody who is using a screen reader. And that's because alternative text is different than other types of content that you'll find on the internet. Alternative text is sort of like a roller coaster. Like once you get on, you are not getting off. Other types of content online, you can pause, you can skip, but if you choose to have the alternative text, you're in it till the end. There's no list features or heading structure to skip through. You have to sit and listen to that whole thing. So if you're bored or if it's irritating or if you're looking for a little specific piece of information, you're not going to find that in alternative text if you have a single image like this. So it can be a little bit irritating to the ears. If we're talking about perception, this is how these people are perceiving internet. It can be a little bit irritating to have super duper long alternative text. So yes, make it perceivable, but think about that screen reader. Think about that not so smart technology that you are designing it for. And check out Molly Burke. One other thing, just to go back to captions, I would also, my other recommendation, just so you guys can get a feel for this perception, if you haven't watched TV recently with the captions on, I would definitely do it. Amazon is a lot of people's favorites because you can adjust the font color and size, which is great. And then Netflix is also a rock star because their captions are just extremely descriptive. The most recent season of Stranger Things definitely had a little like meme moment on the internet because the captions of all the creepy, scary things that were happening, I mean, it was just over the top because the sound editing was over the top. So the captions recreated that same experience, which was fantastic. Okay, so we know that it needs to be perceivable. And we know that images like this aren't necessarily ideal. If you do use them, you got to put everything in there. So you want to consider how folks are perceiving your content. All right, we're going to talk about things being operable right now. And I'll stop sharing just a second. All right, so with operability, I think sometimes folks may perceive this as being outside of your role as faculty. It does refer, there's a lot of overlap with the robust nature of content because it's a lot about keyboard navigation and making sure that you have designed content that is operable for all sorts of people who might be using the internet. So specifically, this is heading structures, lists. Those are going to be super important. If you've ever hung out with a computer science major, I used to have a computer science grad student who was the first time I'd ever really seen somebody do this, and he never touched his mouse. He was constantly just using keyboard navigation the entire time and just flying through pages and scrolling through and not using his mouse. And that is a lot of the experience that somebody who'd be using a screen reader would use. They're skipping through things. Once they hear the start of a title, they're gonna, oh, I'm gonna go to the next thing, as quickly as possible. The same goes for people who might use eye trackers, if they're using any sort of eye tracking technology to get through the internet, if they're doing something, or if they're using a sip and puff machine. Probably aging myself here, but this could be like Christopher Reeve. He had a tracheotomy to breathe, but you saw that he always had that straw. I feel like he's just the most memorable example. And that was how he controlled his wheelchair. People use similar devices also to scroll through the internet and click through the internet, depending on their level of access. They're also, it's not cheap technology, so they might be using different things. So I digress. We want our content to be operable. And this is something that it's a principle you need to understand, because the accessibility checker in Adobe, in Microsoft, in Canvas isn't perfect. It's not a super smart human. So by understanding how we can use these heading structures, we are going to have a better experience for students to get through the internet. So I'm going to share again one example. All right, so we're looking at just a sample little course. And for this, we have our Succeeding in Online Learning. So what we want to do is make sure that we have a strong heading structure. I don't want to go super in depth with heading structure, but just briefly as one little example, we could see that this is something a faculty member created for tips for online classes. So this is lots of great content for students. There's a nice image, but this could be a little bit more operable for a student using some assistive technology, because it would be easier to skip through if we would make some adjustments. So to make those adjustments, what they've done here is they have, and they actually did it correctly, and then I broke it for them for the purpose of this example. But we have 24-point font, and then it's still in paragraph form. Instead, we need to change this to heading 2. Why does it start with heading 2 in Canvas? Well, that is because this is heading 1 up here. So that's automatically formatted in here. So you're going to want to use heading 2. Even if you like the font size of heading 3 better, you want to use heading 2. So if you feel like you don't like how it looks necessarily, in most of these systems, you have the opportunity to change it. So if you like the way that 3 or 4 looks, don't use those unless it's nested underneath. We're going to want to do that instead. We also don't want to bold it. So they bolded it, they made it size 24 font. We don't want to bold or italicize things unnecessarily. Those are said with emphasis for screen readers. So it is not more important. It is just the heading structure. So hearing heading and then it'll announce like, oh, emphasis, or it says it differently, that would be redundant. So we don't need to bold it there. Let's just use the styles that are given to us. Another way that this would be more operable is if we used a list structure. So while in Microsoft, if you have if you do dash and space bar, it'll start automatically formatting it for you. Not everything has that. So this would be more accessible if we added a list structure. Again, our little guy over here, he didn't notice that. He says that there are no accessibility issues detected, but we're smarter than the computer, so we know that we want to add a list. You can watch me be very new to Canvas. So we would go through and make this a list structure. I'll just save it. And then our edited version is here. If you're curious about that, if you want to check your course, if you are using something that doesn't have our little checker man, that doesn't have an accessibility feature built in, this is the slightly more advanced skill, the only one I'll show you today. But if you right click on anything online and you click inspect, it will give you the information that you need. So if we click here, it's going to bring us, oh, this is an image, it's floating, and there's no alt text in here for this. That's because this image was marked as decorative. We didn't need to say, oh, this is a, a person on a mountain with their fist raised. Like, that doesn't add anything to it. It's just purely decorative. Decorative images are totally fine, but you would mark them as so. I think I had that in my other example and I just forgot to show you guys. Yeah, so again, our accessibility checker says we're fine, but this would sort of be unnecessary alt text. If it doesn't actually add anything, we can just click that decorative image. Okay, where are we at? So the principles matter. Overall, accessibility checkers aren't perfect, so we need to understand these principles. It didn't tell us that we needed to have an H2 on there. That was something that we knew that we needed to have. There is some debate out there, especially if you're working with PDFs, if you should be using Title I versus an H1. I would pick one. If your page, for some reason, if your document doesn't have a title, you can use H1, but then you would never use H1 again. So if you don't have a title, use H1 and never use it again. That'll serve as a title, and then you can work your way down. Probably a little too in the weeds with that one, but all right. Understandable, our next element. So for understandable, our content needs to be logical, easy to understand, and formatted in a very predictable manner. In this course, we have some examples of content that is not necessarily understandable. So this is all about how we describe what's on a page. I think there's a difference between what a Canvas course might look like for an in-person class versus an online class, but you still want to tell students exactly what they are supposed to be doing. So for this one, I just have this file here. This isn't my favorite tool to use in Canvas, to just add a file that's hanging out in here. Notes Classroom Management. What is that? What does that mean? I can click it, I can download it. It's going to display right here, but it doesn't necessarily have all the information initially there. Gonna load for me. It's not gonna load. We'll try the next screen. What would be better is, instead of just having random files hanging out in your Canvas course, is for it to be more understandable, would be to have a page. So for this one, week 1 notes, bring to class. So I've offered some instructions there. And then what are they supposed to do with this file? Well, for this week, you need to download this. You can type in it, you can print it, whatever you need to do, but you need to bring it to class and you're going to turn it in. So we have an example assignment that students are then going to fill this out for a classroom management class, maybe some college of ed course. So tell students what the documents are for. It helps everybody. Another example of our content being better would be a grading scale. So for content to be more understandable, oftentimes we want to avoid tables. Tables look so nice, they look so clean, but sometimes they can actually be a little bit more confusing. So we have 2 bad examples here. One, this is someone who just has taken a screenshot and uploaded it into their course. You would think, oh, I can make this more accessible by putting all of this into alternative text. But again, we don't want to get on that roller coaster. That would be so unpleasant to listen to. So instead, this person has also gone through and made a table. It looks nicely formatted, but does it actually need to be a table? So a couple of things here. You could think, oh, well, I'll make it into a table and then I'll use the accessibility checker and I'll add a caption. I'll add a description to what the table is. A little better, moving up in the world. But we would want, anytime there is a table like this, everyone, not just those people with screen readers, would benefit from a description. So the accessibility checker, it thinks that we're better. I'm not gonna add the headers right now, but we could continue to improve by adding information above that says, hey, use this, and which is nice because Canvas gives you the option to display it. But we could be even better by revising this so that it's not a table to begin with. Avoiding tables is one of the biggest things to making content more understandable. I feel like people will add color to tables. Again, we don't want to use color to signify any sort of meaning because that would not be perceivable by everyone equally. So from here, instead of a table, we've broken this down. We've made it more simple. So the grading scale, standard. This is what the grading scale is. The grade breakdown, your assignments and points. Furthermore, so this is a list. So somebody in here could listen to the list at these top levels. And then if they were using a screen reader, they would literally be indenting to get that other information. But really, we could put that before. So 2 categories are required to pass the course. I'm really good at typing. The final exam and the lab. And then you can even get rid of further redundant information because this would be important for everyone. And a good preview to the content. So explaining what to do with documents, that makes it more understandable. Avoiding tables when possible is important. And then our last example I wanted to talk about, this is my little link farm for us today, is talking about links. So I'll put this in the chat for you guys to think about as well. We want our content to be understandable. So when you are writing, I would always, always, always avoid click here. All right. Because for a screen reader, if someone goes to a page and they're looking for the links on the page, like, oh, I'm here, I'm looking for a specific link, and they hear click here, click here, click here. Well, how do they know which one they want to go to? We also don't want to use a big long title like this. If possible, avoid using the URL altogether unless there's a really simple redirect. So if it's, literally like, K-State .edu/food, if you're looking for like meal plans or something, then you might want to use that. You might want to use a simple redirect like that. In general, you should instead be using more descriptive text. So for example, this is the one I'm going to put in at the end of this chat, is make an appointment with me. That takes you to my bookings calendar. So whatever the link is would be much better. If you're having trouble, if that skill is new for you and you're not totally sure what to do about it, I wanted to show you. I love Chrome. Obviously, Chrome is like way better. But Edge has moved up in the world for me. Microsoft does have this really fun thing where if you copy and paste something, if the website is correctly built, it's going to make you a really nice link. So even though I'm copying this, ada.gov, all right, and I'm going to come back to my Google document with my notes. This is what ends up getting pasted. So that looks nice. That is, it makes it accessible for you to begin with. Sometimes this gets a little bit long. The one I put at the very beginning of their chat was just, it just said, DOJ fact sheet, ADA fact sheet. But this one has the longer version of it. So Edge can be a little bit of a helper when it comes to making content more understandable. All right. We're getting into the last one here. Robust. We want our content to be robust. Content that is compatible across platforms and works with all different types of technology then meets this definition of robust. Does it work on your browser, on your computer? Does it work on your cell phone? Does it work on a tablet? So that is something that is important and that a web developer is concerned about all the time. You too should also be concerned about this. My biggest tip is if you are designing a course, look at it on your phone. Look at it in student preview. See what your students are seeing. I'm sure we could probably ask our friends over in IT what the data usage is, but I can guarantee you students are using their phone to consume your classes. So does your content, is it robust? Does it look nice on a phone? So this principle of WCAG, it can often be a little bit easiest for us to set aside because we think that it's all about web developers. But it really is our responsibility to make sure that content is robust too. So trying it on your phone, trying out in different formats can be really helpful. Testing other types of technology too. We're here to help you with Canvas, obviously. But if you are using something fun and unique, a new publisher, a new textbook, you should make sure that it is robust for your students. So whenever you're selecting a new tool or a new software for your course and you want to assess its accessibility, you want to do a quick search for VPAT and whatever your technology is. So for example, I know Modern Languages uses Perusal a lot. I think a lot of English folks probably use it too. So a VPAT is a voluntary product accessibility template. So this new magical law that's coming into place for 2026, which really applied to the internet way back in 2017, was for those businesses or for those organizations that were receiving public money. So obviously we're a government organization, an extension of that, so we need to have our content accessible. We also need the content that we're picking to be accessible. So a lot of these private companies then do a VPAT, that voluntary product accessibility template. It's a great way to start. I once had a vendor who, I wish I had saved the email. It was just salacious. It was so fun. And we were looking for a tool to display our admissions view book online and find something that like looked, a little bit more robust than just a PDF. So we were looking at this vendor and we couldn't figure out if it was accessible or not. And I couldn't find a VPAT and, asked like, hey, what are your accessibility parameters? How do you make your content accessible? It was a very popular product for schools to use. I mean, they're still around. And basically, we are not accessible. We have no plans to be accessible. Ain't gonna do it, not gonna do it. And then we didn't give them our money. So, I mean, that's how that works. So you want to go ahead and look for that VPAT. And I'll briefly describe how you can maybe start reading a VPAT. So let me go ahead and share our screen again. So Perusal does have a VPAT. We can Google it and then they're going to come up with an accessibility statement. So yes, Perusal have several features that increase accessibility. It looks like it's pretty good. They have all sorts of you can change the color font and the contrast. That's really good for students with dyslexia or different types of learning disabilities. So there's tons of great stuff in here. Perusal has this accessibility statement. Are they good enough? Probably. I think that they pass muster, but it's still about the user. Canvas has a VPAT out there, but we can still put non-ADA compliant material into Canvas. The same is true of Perusal. It's a tool. It's relatively accessible, but you could make it inaccessible if you were putting, or low quality scans of your old favorite PDF journal article in there. We should be putting high quality OCR PDFs in there. Another one that I wanted to look at, this is just a really fun example. H5P is a company that we have just started working with, or at least I've just started working with, and they help make all sorts of really pretty content in courses, in textbooks. I cannot remember one of the OER textbook people in the library, but they also are powered by H5P. So there's all different types of content. Just like you can make a test, a quiz in Canvas, you can use H5P for this. So theirs is a little bit more complicated. There are some that they say, no, really are not accessible. This does not meet the muster of accessibility. It also, I love that they say maintained by the core team. So maybe a third party did it. Maybe it's an old product they developed that they have not updated. So it was like, oh, anything that's in beta or like it says not maintained, I would avoid it. That's probably not going to be great. So you want to think about if it is going to work for your course or the type of content you have. And a brief digression on UDL, Universal Design for Learning. Universal Design for Learning does not mean like week 1, you listen to a podcast. Week 2, you read the book. Week 3, we have a cool video. It means you're basically building a million courses in one. Week 1, you are listening to a podcast, watching a video, you read the book, and the student has options. So you need to make sure that across that spectrum, that one of those will be accessible to your students. So if you have a student who is taking a class and they don't speak, they struggle with speech, or it's not something, but they're in a public speaking class, they're doing a Spanish class and they have to build some content, you might want to not use just the dictation tool. You would want to put together a couple of different pieces, give them options, so at the end of the day, they have something accessible. In general, let's just make our content accessible, but if you are doing UDL and you're giving options, think about, is there something for everyone in here? And they really get to choose. Like that's the whole point. You don't expect them to do both. They can pick, one or more, but they need to have one that fits with them and their level of ability. So that is what is going to support that robustness that we need to have, is making sure that we're resizing our screen. So just making it smaller, looking at it on your phone is going to be helpful. And then if you want to start diving into the deep end, thinking about a VPAT for your textbooks, for any of the third-party tools that you're using. So those are the principles of accessibility that we have here. Couple of examples. Yeah, and I think we're ready for questions if you guys are curious about anything. If you have really specific questions, that's also fine.